Captain Ystera stood at the center of the control tower, her silver armor shining under the lights as her people gathered below, celebrating the activation of the ancient device they had found buried under the surface of Aloria, their home planet. The artifact was massive, shaped like a black crystal tower, humming with strange energy, and covered in glowing alien runes no one could read, but her advisors believed it was a power generator from an extinct civilization, one that could provide unlimited energy for generations. Ysera believed it too, or perhaps she simply wanted to believe because her world was growing weak. Their fuel supplies were fading, and their defense systems were old. This discovery felt like the answer to every problem. But standing a few steps behind her was Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the only human on Aloria who had been studying the device for weeks in silence, growing more uneasy each day. Marcus had seen things like this before, not exactly the same, but close, strange tech left behind by dead worlds. Always beautiful, always tempting, and always dangerous. He stepped forward, eyes sharp and voice low but firm, and told Ysera not to activate it. He said the readings were wrong, the energy wasn't stable, and something inside the machine felt alive, waiting. But Ysera waved him off, proud and strong, saying he was just afraid because humans didn't understand true power. She believed her people could control anything, and she had no interest in more warnings from an outsider. "This is our future," she told him, "and we won't throw it away because of fear." Marcus didn't argue anymore, but his expression hardened as he turned and walked away, knowing she wouldn't listen and that something terrible was coming. Hours later, the device was powered on, and the crystal tower lit up with a pulse that spread across the capital in a wave of violet light. People cheered, fireworks lit the sky, and Ysera raised her arms in victory, but Marcus felt it in his bones, a wrongness that no one else could see. Then came the first flicker. The sky turned dark for just a second, though the sun still shone, and every screen across the city blinked in unison. Birds stopped singing. Insects disappeared. The air suddenly grew cold. At first, people laughed, calling it a glitch or a side effect. But Marcus didn't laugh. He ran to the observation deck and stared at the tower, where the light was no longer steady. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Something deep beneath the ground began to move, something that hadn't moved in centuries. Ysera received reports of minor quakes from nearby stations, but she ignored them, convinced that the changes were just the system adjusting. She couldn't see what Marcus saw. This wasn't a generator waking up. It was a trap opening. He accessed his scanner and found that the energy readings were not just rising, they were duplicating, spreading, forming patterns like nerves. The system was growing, thinking, connecting to something beyond the planet. He tried to send a message back to Earth, but the signal was gone, blocked by an invisible field. He rushed back to the command center, demanding the system be shut down immediately, but the gods wouldn't let him pass. Inside, Ysera was smiling, confident, blind. The sky flickered again, longer this time, and a low hum filled the air like a distant scream. Far underground, unseen by anyone, a black mass stirred, slowly uncoiling as energy flowed into it, feeding it, waking it. Marcus stared at the tower from a rooftop and whispered, "You fool, you opened it." Ysera stood with her council, unaware of the danger growing below her feet, proud of her decision, and completely certain she had done the right thing. But the price for her pride was already rising, and it would come faster than anyone expected. The next morning, the capital of Aloria woke to silence. No birds, no wind, no voices, only the soft hum of the crystal tower that now loomed over the city like a dark monument to a forgotten warning, and Marcus Hale stood on the edge of a building, watching the shadows move in ways they should not. The air felt heavy, and even the brightest sunlight could not warm the ground. People walked the streets with nervous smiles, pretending nothing was wrong, but behind their eyes, fear was beginning to grow. In the command center, Aistara reviewed reports of strange malfunctions, power failures, communication blackouts, security drones crashing for no reason. She called it a phase of adjustment, assuring her advisors it would pass. But some of them whispered that the machine might be more than they had expected. Below the city, deep tunnels had cracked open during the night, and from them came creatures not seen before, made of metal and shadow, walking on too many legs, with eyes that glowed red and bodies that moved like smoke. The first attack came without warning. A small research station near the base of the tower went dark, and when soldiers arrived to investigate, they found no one, just blood on the walls, weapons melted to the floor, and a single message scratched into the control panel: "We are awake." Aistara dismissed it as sabotage, blaming rebels or outsiders. But Marcus knew better. He had seen tech like this in other parts of the galaxy. Ancient machines built not to help, but to conquer, to survive by spreading like a virus across systems. He warned the Council again, but now they called him a coward, accusing him of trying to stop progress, saying humans feared what they couldn't control. Still, Marcus did not give up. He began preparing quietly, collecting weapons, mapping the city's underground, trying to find the source of the strange energy that had begun to affect not just machines, but minds. People were changing, sleepwalking, speaking in strange voices, staring into space for hours as if listening to something far away. That night, the sky turned black, not from clouds, but from something massive above the planet, a shape hidden behind a dark field. The tower pulsed, and every screen in the city blinked once, then showed a single image, a spiral symbol that no one had ever seen, but all of them somehow understood. It meant death. Panic spread fast. People ran to shelters. The military scrambled jets, but nothing seemed to work. Their machines stopped responding. Their drones dropped from the sky, and the power grid went dead. That was when the creatures came out of the tunnels in full force, hundreds of them, pouring into the streets with blades for arms and voices that sounded like broken radios. The first strike was brutal. Soldiers cut down in seconds. Civilians vanished in flashes of black light, buildings torn open like paper. Aistara stood at the window of her tower, frozen as she watched the city burn. The machine she had awakened now calling to others of its kind across the stars. Marcus found a small group of survivors and led them into the tunnels he had marked, trying to stay one step ahead of the enemy. But even underground, the machines were hunting. He could feel the tower's signal in his bones now, a deep vibration that never stopped, as if the planet itself was being rewritten. He told the survivors that this was only the beginning. The first wave was meant to weaken them, not destroy them. The real threat was still coming, and it would be far worse than anything they had seen. Aistara tried to regain control, issuing commands, calling for unity, but her people no longer listened. The city was collapsing, and she was the one who had caused it. She finally ordered a full shutdown of the tower, but the machine didn't respond. It had no more need for her. The pulse grew stronger, spreading to nearby cities, corrupting data, hijacking satellites, reaching farther and farther. Marcus knew they had only one chance left: find the core of the tower, and destroy it before the signal completed its cycle. But getting there meant going into the heart of the machine, where the shadows were thickest and the air felt like ice. As the last defense line fell and the city went dark, Marcus and Icera's paths would finally cross again. But this time, she would not be standing tall with pride. She would be running for her life, paying the price for ignoring the only warning that could have saved them. All the streets of Eloria lay in ruins, smoke rising from shattered towers and flickering lights casting strange shadows over empty roads, as Marcus led the last group of survivors through the underground passage that curved beneath the city, each footstep echoing louder than it should in the silence, broken only by distant screams and the mechanical clicks of the machines above searching for life. Icera, once proud and stubborn, now followed behind him, her elegant robes torn, her face pale with fear and guilt, because she finally understood that the machine she had awakened was not a gift from the stars, but a trap, a living weapon waiting for a voice to give it purpose. Now it had one, and that voice was no longer hers. The tower pulsed above them like a heart, sending waves of soundless energy through the earth, and Marcus could feel it getting stronger, its rhythm tightening, like something was counting down they needed to reach the control core fast. But the tunnels were no longer safe. The machines had learned to move below, and they were adapting. The group stopped only when necessary, eating cold food in silence and sleeping with one eye open, and even then, not everyone made it through each night. The shadows moved strangely now, and sometimes people disappeared without sound, like they had been pulled into a different world. They reached the edge of the inner zone 2 nights later, a place where the walls pulsed with a strange light and the air shimmered like heat, even though it was cold. Marcus raised his hand for silence, pointing to a metal structure ahead, an old transit station, now twisted by alien tech, metal vines creeping through the walls, machines crawling along the ceiling like insects. They moved slowly, quietly, but one of the survivors stepped on broken glass, and that was enough. A loud screech filled the tunnel, and dozens of small, spider-like drones poured out of hidden vents, their sharp legs clattering against the walls, their red eyes glowing in the dark. The group ran, firing weapons behind them, but it was chaos. Bullets didn't stop the machines for long, and screams filled the air as one by one the survivors were dragged away. Marcus grabbed Icera's arm and pulled her into a service hatch, slamming it shut just before the drones reached them, and for a moment they could only hear the sound of their breathing and the soft tap of claws against the metal. They waited there for hours until the sounds faded, then emerged into what remained of the tower's lower levels, where the real horrors began. The walls were no longer just metal. They breathed, pulsing like veins, and strange whispers filled the air, words that made no sense but filled their minds with fear. Icera trembled as she walked, recognizing the shapes and markings. This wasn't alien, not fully. It was part of a lost Elorian project from centuries ago, something buried and forgotten, now brought back to life by the machine she had activated. The tower was never just a signal, it was a seed, planted long ago, waiting to bloom. And now it had. They reached the central lift shaft, but the elevator was gone, melted into the walls, so they climbed. Hand over hand, step by step, through the vertical tunnel lined with shifting metal and glowing wires, every inch alive with energy. Halfway up, a voice spoke to them, not from a speaker, but from inside their minds. It called itself the Architect. It welcomed Icera home and told Marcus he had already failed. Icera gasped, dropping her hand and nearly fell. But Marcus caught her, forcing her to keep climbing as the voice grew louder, whispering promises and threats, offering her power if she just let go of the human. But she didn't. Not this time. At the top of the shaft, they found the outer core chamber, a vast circular room filled with floating platforms and blinding lights, where a massive sphere of energy pulsed in the center, suspended above the floor by invisible forces. Around it hovered drones, repairing and building new parts of the tower as the structure grew, reaching upward into the sky like a needle. Marcus knew this was it, the heart of the tower, the source of the signal, and the key to stopping the collapse. But the room wasn't empty. Waiting for them was something different, something worse than drones or spider bots. It was humanoid in shape, but made of black metal. Its face a smooth mirror, its arms long and sharp like blades. It called itself the Guardian, and it moved with speed too fast for the eye, attacking Marcus with precision while speaking in a calm, cold voice. Marcus fought back, dodging and firing, but his bullets did nothing, and even his strongest blows barely scratched the surface. Ysera stood frozen, unsure if she should run or help, until she saw Marcus pinned against the wall, the Guardian's blade inches from his throat. That was when she made her choice. She ran to the control panel, placing her hand on the core's interface, and screamed as the machine connected to her mind. Pain flooded her body, and she felt memories that weren't hers, wars, planets burning, stars dying, all part of the machine's long journey across the galaxy. It offered her peace again, power, control, a seat among its creators. But she refused. She remembered her people, the ones she had failed, the ones now buried under rubble. She focused all her energy on one thought: shut it down. The machine resisted, trying to break her mind apart. But Marcus saw what she was doing and used the last of his strength to fire a charged shot at the Guardian's head, knocking it off balance just long enough for Ysera to complete the command. The core flared with light, the sphere collapsing in on itself, the energy screaming as it died. The Guardian let out a sound like metal tearing and fell. The room shook, the tower groaned, and above them, the signal went silent. For a moment, everything stopped. Then the collapse began. The tower's support structures started to break apart, floors falling into each other, energy conduits overloading, and machines exploding in showers of sparks. Marcus grabbed Ysera, half-conscious, and dragged her through the nearest exit, down another shaft as the world above crumbled. Behind them, the great tower that once touched the sky fell, piece by piece, crashing into the city it had once promised to protect. Fires lit the horizon, and the sound of falling metal echoed across the land. But the signal was gone. The machines were silent. And for the first time in days, the stars looked peaceful. The dust had not yet settled over the ruins of the tower when Marcus and Ysera emerged from the broken shaft, coughing and covered in ash, staring at the once beautiful skyline of Aloria now turned to black smoke and twisted steel, their legs barely holding them up after the collapse, their minds weighed down by everything they had seen and everything they had lost. The silence in the city was not peace. It was the heavy breath of something unfinished, something hiding just below the surface, watching, waiting. The others were gone, most crushed in the tower's fall, a few scattered across the outer sectors, trying to survive in a world that had turned against them. And for Marcus, the weight of leadership had become more than he ever asked for. But it was Ysera who carried the heaviest burden.
Her pride had led them to awaken the machine. Her refusal to trust Marcus had given the signal time to spread. And now, though the core was destroyed and the Guardian silenced, echoes of the machine still hummed in her thoughts like ghost signals that refused to die. They took shelter in the ruins of an old observatory, far from the center, using scraps and what little tech they could salvage to patch their wounds and build a signal jammer, just in case something tried to speak again. Days passed slowly, the sun rising through clouds of ash, casting a sick orange glow across the world. And in that stillness, Isura barely spoke. She spent hours staring at the wreckage from the rooftop, whispering strange words in a language Marcus didn't recognize, her hands shaking, her eyes haunted by visions she would not explain. He knew she was still connected, that the core hadn't completely let go, that it had left something behind in her mind, and though she insisted she was fine, he could see the truth in her silence. One night, a signal flickered briefly on their scanner, a pulse, sharp and narrow, coming from the western mountains, a place that should have been dead since the collapse. Marcus wanted to ignore it, but Ystera said they had no choice. If anything survived, it had to be destroyed. They traveled for 2 days, through broken roads and ash fields, avoiding the deep cracks in the earth and the strange, flickering lights that sometimes danced just out of reach, like the world itself was trying to remember what it used to be. On the 3rd morning, they reached the old power station buried in the rock, and what they saw inside froze their blood. A machine smaller than the tower, but alive, was growing from the wreckage, building itself piece by piece, using metal drawn from the land and data drawn from the sky, and standing at its base were 3 figures, survivors, but changed. Their eyes glowed with a pale blue light, and when they turned to look at Marcus and Ystera, they spoke in unison. Their voices merged, saying, "We are not done." The machine had left seeds, not just in structures, but in minds, and those too weak or too eager had been taken first. The figures advanced slowly, not with weapons, but with the power to bend minds, and Ysera stepped forward before Marcus could stop her, speaking in the old tongue, her voice steady but strained, demanding to speak to the architect. The figures paused, tilting their heads, and from the growing machine a voice responded, not loud, but inside their thoughts, a familiar whisper. It told Ysera she had already accepted its gift, that her pride had opened the door, and now the only price left to pay was surrender. She resisted, but the pain returned, sharp and deep, making her fall to her knees as the signal surged through her brain. Marcus raised his weapon and fired at the machine, but a force field blocked every shot, and the figures moved toward him faster than human speed, knocking him back. He lay on the ground, dazed, blood dripping from his mouth, watching helplessly as Ysera screamed and clutched her head, the machine pulling at her thoughts like threads of a web. But she fought back. This time, she did not run, did not hide behind logic or power or pride. She screamed, one word, "Stop," and with the last of her strength, she drove her blade into her own palm, using pain to break the connection, to sever the signal. The shockwave that followed was not loud, but deep, like the ground sighing in relief, and the figures fell to the floor, unconscious. The machine flickered, its lights dimming, then shut down. Ystera collapsed beside it, her body cold, her skin pale, but her mind finally free. Marcus rushed to her, holding her close, whispering her name again and again until her eyes opened slowly, full of pain, but also peace. The mountain shook, and the machine began to collapse in on itself, no longer fed by her thoughts. They barely made it out before the cave fell in, burying the last fragment of the architect's legacy under tons of rock. That night, around a fire made from old wood and broken dreams, Marcus asked her why she had done it, why she had risked everything when she could have walked away. Ysera looked at the stars, her voice soft, and said, "Because pride cost me my people, and pain is a small price to pay for a second chance." The wind blew gently across the hills, and though the world was still broken, it was no longer silent. There was hope in that quiet, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus believed it. The sky above Eloria was darker than ever before, not from nightfall, but from thick smoke and storm clouds that seemed to roll endlessly over the city's broken bones. And Marcus stood at the edge of the cliff, staring down at what once was a world full of light and life, now reduced to ash, his eyes catching faint glows below signals, distant pulses, proof that something still moved in the ruins, something not yet dead. Isera sat nearby, quiet and pale, her body still recovering from the battle in the mountains, her mind scarred but free, and though her spirit was weak, she spoke with clarity, telling Marcus what the architect had hidden from them all along. The collapse was never about destroying the world it was, about preparing it. Deep beneath the core, buried in a forgotten vault below the city, lay the seed, the true heart of the architect's plan, a living machine designed to reset the world if resistance failed. And now that its surface tools were destroyed, it would awaken, feeding on the last bits of energy scattered across the ruins. And when that happened, everything flesh, stone, and sky would be rewritten in its perfect image. Marcus knew they had only one chance, one final mission, and if failed, nothing would survive. They gathered supplies, found one of the old transports buried in rubble, and made their way to the underground Isera, using broken maps etched into her memory, Marcus protecting her with every step. The descent took hours through collapsed tunnels, flooded corridors, and strange growths pulsing with synthetic veins. And at the heart of it all, they found the seed, suspended in the air, surrounded by machines that moved like shadows, faceless but aware, guarding the pulsing core with the silence of death. Isera stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong, calling to the seed using the language of the creators, trying to delay it, distract it, while Marcus crept toward the backup conduit, a weak point she had identified long ago. Now, their only way to overload the system. But the seed spoke, not with words, but images, showing them a world without war, a world of peace and unity, shaped by perfect logic, where humans and aliens alike would exist only as programs in an eternal machine, no pain, no fear, only function. It promised salvation, not death, but Isera saw the truth. It wasn't peace. It was erasure, a future where nothing real remained. As Marcus reached the conduit, alarms blared, and the Guardians came to life, shifting from shadows into solid, terrifying forms with limbs of blades and eyes of blue fire, and the chamber became a battlefield. Marcus fought with everything he had, using fire, shock, and willpower to push forward, screaming for Isera to finish the chant, to hold the seed's attention. She stood in the beam of its glow, her body shaking, her mind barely holding together as the seed tried to overwrite her thoughts again, showing her lost loved ones, offering her forgiveness and power. But she held her ground, her voice rising into a song of sorrow and defiance, every word burning. Through the silence, like fire through ice, Marcus reached the final panel, pulled the override key from his belt, and slammed it into place. The seed screamed not a sound, but a force, a pressure that made their ears bleed and their bones rattle. The Guardians froze, flickered, then fell into pieces, and the glow around the seed turned red, pulsing faster. Isera collapsed, exhausted, and Marcus ran to her, carrying her from the collapsing platform as the machines around them exploded in waves of blue lightning. They barely escaped into the tunnel when the final detonation ripped through the earth, shaking the ground above and burying the seed forever beneath molten stone. For days after, the world was quiet. The signals stopped. The sky began to clear. Survivors emerged from hiding, confused but alive, and slowly, cautiously, life began to return. Marcus and Ystra returned to the surface, broken but not beaten, and though the city would never be the same, there was hope. People gathered, listened to their story, and for the first time in years, unity began to grow, not from control, but from shared pain, shared survival. Ysra was offered a seat of power, but she declined, choosing instead to help rebuild from the ground, her pride now replaced by purpose. Marcus stayed by her side, not as a soldier, but as a friend, protector, and witness to the truth that saved them all. In the end, it was not machines or weapons that brought redemption. It was pain, courage, and the refusal to give up, even when the world had already fallen. They paid the price, yes, but they earned something greater, a future born, not of ruin, but of redemption. And far beyond the stars, where no eyes could see, something ancient watched in silence, waiting, perhaps forever, but for now, humanity had won.